There's a classic saying in tech sales and sales in general that you get delegated to the person that you sound like. Today, I want to talk through that as it's one of the biggest mistakes that new reps, particularly moving from SDR to account executive, make. Just to set the stage as to what this is even referring to in the first place, particularly when you're getting into a really technical sale, it's very easy to want to overcompensate for either your lack of technical knowledge or, admittedly, in my own background, having an engineering degree, there are times where I actually go too deep technically and kind of lose focus on the bigger picture. Now, I think a really important thing to set the stage in a B2B tech sales motion, some of you may be getting familiar with the term product-led growth. There's also terms like land and expand, and it really depends on where you're going. But more and more SaaS companies, more and more software products, regardless of how technical, are starting to go towards that land and expand product-led growth sales motion. And what that means is usually you as a rep are just trying to get into an account. And ideally, you make a product that works really well. It becomes, once successful with a small adoption by maybe a team of 10 people, it becomes very compelling and easier for teams of 10, teams of 50, teams of 100 to then adopt the tool. And many times where traditionally in the 80s, in the 90s, maybe even in the 2000s, a lot of times it's a large enterprise motion. It's an all or nothing type of sale. The entire company is going to move their infrastructure to this tool, etc. Now, teams are so segmented, there's so many tools available for different tech products, whether it's a mobile app, etc., that now a lot of times you're able to sell a small amount of a tool into one specific team and grow that way. So all that to say, I don't want the message of this video to be misconstrued as always talk like a C-level executive. But that being said, many times you need to be able to appropriately match and mirror the person that you're speaking with, and also make sure that once you've gotten everything you need from certain levels of a conversation, that you can switch and make sure we're focused on a broader business initiative and positive business outcome. So like as an example, right? You're an SDR. You just moved into the SMB account executive role. You really want to make sure you're selling a highly technical product and want to make sure that engineers know that you know your stuff. Right? And that's great. You need to have that knowledge. And in many cases, it's not even that you have that knowledge to then tell them everything about your product. It's you have that knowledge so you can trap them. You can guide a conversation in a way that makes them realize that your product is incredibly well suited to not only solve their technical challenges, but create an overwhelmingly large positive business outcome. And I think a huge mistake early on, even if your entry point at an account is to speak with a developer, I've been as guilty of this as anyone that I've spoken with or anyone that I'm referring to. But you'll get a developer on the line. It's at a huge account. It's at a great target account. And that developer is going to sit there and ask you, how do you do this? How do you do this? What is this feature? How do you handle this? Etc., right? It just goes on and on. A huge mistake by new reps is to engage and answer all of those questions. And instead, in many cases, we need to, as reps, be comfortable asking them, why are they even asking what they're asking? Is what they're asking important? There's been many times where I'm having a conversation and in a past company at a database, as an example, someone wants to talk immediately about how we scale. How is your solution better than this? And instead of sitting there and going back to the battle cards, going back to some things I read on a white paper, it's important, and I've literally had to stop prospects and say, hey, I can answer this question, but candidly, I don't know why it's important. I haven't really understood your use case in the first place, and candidly, there's some scenarios where our competitor is actually a better fit anyway. So I can't really answer that question, and it really helped me to better understand this about what you're doing, right? There's many ways to handle it, but my point being, again, is in doing that, we've let them know that, look, we can talk about features all day, but why is that important? The deadliest thing about this is that after you have that conversation with the developer, even if they're like, wow, I feel like I really know this product, it's great. You know what they're gonna do when they go to their VP who's incredibly busy, who has 10 meetings a day that are 30 minutes to 60 minutes long, is he's gonna have a 10-minute window to try and tell that VP why it's important, and he's gonna sit there talking about your throughput speeds, talking about how your architecture is better than the competitor. And candidly, that VP doesn't really care. And again, it's not that tech is ubiquitous. There are many solutions that work better in certain situations, and it's important to get that win. But if that developer is just trying to sit there and say, no, seriously, this tool is amazing, like I would really love to use it. Well, the VP's natural question is, well, that's great, individual. What happens if you leave our company 6 months from now? What happens to all of our different developers that may or may not have a skill set that would allow them to develop on that tool? And if that individual developer and you have just been spending all day talking about features, it doesn't really matter if your product is even better, if it's faster, if it's all these different things, if there's not broader alignment going up to a manager or VP level of how it fits in the broader scope of their entire team and their broader tech stack. So that brings up my next point. If we're talking to that VP level, we get a chance now to get in front of them because maybe we did have a good conversation with the developer, but we've also tied it to the department-wide goals that they have, whether it's reducing downtime, whether it's making their application serve twice as many customers. These are business level objectives that a manager in VP is focused on. And as you work up to the C-suite, it really comes down to revenue, to positive business outcomes. These types of topics are what's really going to differentiate yourself. So as you now work up from that developer, you get the technical win, you show them important features, but you also make sure that they're understanding how that fits and makes the entire team's life easier. Now as you go to this VP, you're coming in not even worried about these low-level features, and you're right away starting around, my understanding of how this fits into your department is X, Y, and Z. Can you help me understand what it means for you a year from now if this is successfully implemented? Are we driving customer-facing revenue? Are we increasing X, Y, and Z, right? And these are the conversations that the VP wants to have, as opposed to, hey, I want to tell you about the difference between this, and our speed is 4 times faster and all this. They don't really care, right? Because for every case study that your company has, your competitor has one too. They've got equally impressive logos. They're doing many different things. So the VP needs to understand that you get their business and you're gonna make their life really easy. And by extension, showing them how it's gonna fit to their team, you unlock the ability with a VP, with a manager, to now talk about the broader revenue impacts. And there's many different things this could be. This could be even reducing headcount, automating things that are manual processes, or it could be, hey, an increase in speed directly ties to a doubling of our revenue. Whatever it might be, it's on you to uncover that. Unless you've done that, and now let's say it's your 4th or 5th call, the CTO has finally agreed to show up and take a call. If you're still sitting there and you're trying to convince them how this integrates with their existing tool set, how it makes their entire team's life easier, everyone's gonna say that. Have you dug deep enough at that manager, at that VP level, to understand how it impacts the bottom line? What initiative a year from now are they going to spend and save 50% of their IT budget? On the flip side, are they going to increase the number of customers they can serve, thus directly tying to a massive increase in revenue? If you're coming to the table with the CTO and you're talking at that length, hey, I want to recap what I've said to the team thus far. This is how we see the tool fitting in. And my understanding from the VP that I spoke with, who's probably also on this call, is that if we can fit into the team, if the team integrates this, it means that 1, we don't have to hire any additional headcount this upcoming year, and 2, we're gonna be well positioned to handle seasonal spikes come Black Friday in the example of an e-commerce company. And these are the types of conversations you want to have, especially as you go to larger and larger organizations. If you're sitting there, God forbid, with a CTO talking about throughput, talking about the difference between you and this person, they do not care. That needs to be settled for them and understood by the time you show up to a meeting. And when you're coming into a meeting with a higher and higher persona, now you need to come with a very well-educated and strong point of view. Obviously confirm with them that everything you're understanding is correct, but now you're showing them with your tool specifically how it's going to drive that positive business outcome. It's not that these different features and individual things are necessarily irrelevant, but the CTO has hired people and brought on teams to figure that stuff out for them. And so again, as you're getting to this highest level, when you're coming in and saying, hey, I've spoken with some of your developers and we've talked a lot about some of the technical things we're going to validate throughout our POV. Your management gives me the impression that if this is successfully implemented, now it means we can, 1, not have to find and source new engineers to double our headcount as originally projected, which now is also going to lead to a 40% decrease in human capital cost of your different developers. CTO, from your perspective, does what I'm saying align with your vantage point? And I would love to know, if so, from your vantage point, what are other things that we can validate to give you the best outcome and test if this is truly a fit at every level of your organization? Now, obviously, I'm getting to record this in real time. The conversation is going to go a lot different, but I do hope that illustrates the differences. Again, it's not that speaking at different levels is a bad thing, but you need to make sure you moderate how often you're doing that. You need to make sure if you have a developer, if you have a VP and a CTO on the phone at all times, you might not even get into the features at all or very minimally do so, and you're very quickly elevating up to talk about the business objectives. Over the next 12 months, if this is implemented successfully, if we can quadruple your speed, my understanding is that we can do X, Y, and Z. You can save money. You can increase revenue from customers. This means you can do all these different things better. Am I correct, right? And again, I could go on in examples, and again, I also have the benefit of recording this on a camera and not being in real time, where it's much more difficult to do. But if you're starting to ramp into that account executive role, if you're finding it difficult, or maybe you're overly technical or you're not technical enough, these are the types of things that I hope can give you a good sanity check and make sure you're thinking in the right way given every different persona you're speaking with. But I hope that helps, and we will see you in our next video. Thanks.